without further ado, please welcome Rebecca Anderson to the stage. Yes. Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Okay. You got this. You know this.
So I was driving north from Chicago back to the suburbs, and I had a car full of teens in the car with me. They were the alpha dogs of the group. We were returning from our annual confirmation class worship field trip. You know, like you do. So we had gone to church that morning in the city, and on the way down, I had had not the alpha dogs, but my guys, the nerdy guys. And they turned the radio dial around and found songs that they liked, and at some point we realized that the car behind us had the same radio station because briefly we were all bopping in rhythm together, them in the rearview mirror and us in our car. So on the way back, I had the alpha dogs. An alpha dog, like the big guy, gets in the front seat and he says, "I'll tell you one thing. We're not going to listen to the radio and dance like idiots." And I said, "You don't know what you're missing." And he said, "I do. What I'm missing is a sense of shame." And I said, "What you're missing is a sense of freedom." So, I don't know if it's obvious, but when I was in high school, I was not an alpha dog. I took a puppet to my prom as my date. Thank you. And I did try sometimes to be less weird than I was, but I found out that I could not be any less weird than I was. And also I figured, like, if other people thought I was weird, whatever. They were weird. So it was while I was in high school, I did a lot of bits, right? Like I did a lot of characters, I did a lot of bits around the home, and my one of the characters that emerged during this time was this girl named Ugly Girl, who my mother was not a fan of. And Ugly Girl was just like me, but like turned inside out, like all of my awkwardness, all of the everything on the outside, and she was just sort of like, you know, like, also, I had a retainer with 2 teeth on it. They were my lateral incisors. So I could, if you want to get technical, so I could take my retainer out and then just sort of, you know, she was a nice person, just awkward. And my mother hated her, and she was like, "Please don't make that face. Please don't make that face, Rebecca." So, but Ugly Girl hung around for a while. She went to college with me. Like, I remember Ugly Girl my first year of college, like eating pizza on the floor of the hallway of my dorm, like whatever. And then gradually she just sort of like evaporated. She just went away. So part of my job a few years ago was that I took these same kids, these alpha dogs and these nerds, down to Guatemala for a week. And it was a service trip, and we went to this home and school run by nuns. And it was my job to run this trip and like teach about history and the ways that our government fucked up Guatemala, and teach about try to teach them something about the fact that that I was taking these kids from this super wealthy zip code to one of the poorest places, and try to teach them something so they didn't come back and say stupid shit like, "They're so poor, but they're so happy." Like, that was my job, right? So. And the kids talked about how it's a good job. And the kids talked about how it was really hard, but it was good to be like away from their phones. And it was hard, but it was good to be like away from mirrors, and like they didn't have to wear makeup if they didn't want to, and they didn't have to like dress cute if they could dress like practically. They didn't have to dress cute. And how it was good but hard to be away from like their Snapchat streaks or whatever, that's a thing. Anyway, so like social media and their schedules and their pressure. And the thing is that I had the same experience, even though I was one of the adult leaders. Like, I left a bunch of shit back here too. Like a demanding boss who thought that everything I did reflected on him, and you know, like the pressure to look cute. Like, can you go out to the grocery store in like pajama boobs, or is that like a failure of your humanity or whatever? You know, like what? How are you allowed to be a person? And so I would get to Guatemala, and it was this great like cultural like learning and religious, and it was beautiful, and we played in it, and it felt like camp, and the kids there were really happy because they were off school usually when we were there, and so it was just this great time that I experienced sort of the way my kids did. And so here's one of the weird things. Obviously, the trip was not about this, but a side effect of this trip is that while I was there in Guatemala, I felt beautiful. And the job was not glamorous. Like I took these super rich kids somewhere and like when they got stomach bugs, like I cleaned up their puke, yay. And like, I like enforced the no cell phone rule and I like ran meetings that they were like, oh, do we have to have a meeting? And like, I did all this in like paint stained clothes that were like just like usually old paint stained clothes. So I was sort of like wedged into them. And I felt beautiful. And what's even weirder and non-empirical is that the pictures bear this out. Like I look beautiful in the pictures. And I'm like greasy and like braids and no makeup and beautiful. So one night we were driving back from an errand nearby Tecpan, and we were in the back of a pickup truck, and we were sitting on like a bunch of shovels, and Danny, the school driver, and one of the nuns, and the oldest group member was in the cab, and we were sitting in the back, and my friend was like, oh God, it's so dry here. I just like, and she was back. Like Ugly Girl showed up in this pickup truck in Guatemala on the Pan American Highway, and I told my friends and I started doing her, and they were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And I told them the story, and she got a name, and it was La Chica Fea, and La Fea was like a fucking hit, And so the last night of that trip, we went out to dinner in Antigua, Guatemala. An adult was sitting next to me, and she said, ¿Por qué la fea habla español mejor que tú? And I was like, oh my God, she's totally right. Like, not only do I speak more haltingly than La Fea, but like her vocabulary is better than mine, which is weird. And I was like, and I joked, right? And I was like, I don't know, because she's got nothing to lose. And my friend was like, that's exactly why she speaks better Spanish than you do. And that's stupid. Now, ahora, La Fea vive en Guatemala. Y yo vivo aquí. And I'm trying to live for better or worse, like I've got nothing to lose but a sense of freedom.